Okay, all right. I'm gonna start this. My audio settings aren't what I want them to be. You know, you show up someplace, you have everything set up at home, and oh, that is the nature of OBS, I suppose. Yeah, I can tell I'm coming through here. Let's double check on Zoom how things are going. Here, we'll switch to this. So I hope everybody's doing well tonight. My name is Peter. I'm the founding leader of the Electoral Reform Party. And yeah, it's about 6:50. Might as well get this thing started. We're running a couple minutes late here. Our plan was to wait for more people to join the Zoom call. I can see there's some people here. What's up? How is everybody doing? All right, so the idea of starting this party in the first place was to address electoral reform, right? Like, this stuff that happened with Trudeau a number of years ago, 2015 being supposed to be the last election under first past the post, right? And a bunch of us who maybe wouldn't have normally voted Liberal. And I'm sure that had something to do with the majority he got there in 2015. Yeah, that's probably where this party really started. That rubbed me the wrong way. I started getting involved with the NDP, and that didn't exactly pan out the way I wanted it to, but I certainly learned a lot, and I've still got a lot of respect for that party. So I actually used to run the NDP Riding Association out of the Port Credit Legion here. I didn't start the tradition of hosting the meetings at the Legion here, but it's a good venue for it, isn't it? I mean, look at these flags, you know, I didn't buy these. Yeah, we'll definitely be doing more of these because I want the turnout to be bigger, and you know, this is a good dry run, I think, for doing town halls, doing riding association meetings. They're really similar kind of events, aren't they? I think first things first about tonight is I don't think we should take it, you know, too seriously. It's, you know, here I am, Peter House, the founding leader of the Electoral Reform Party. You know, it's not as impressive as maybe it sounds. We're going to talk about exactly how this party got started tonight. One of the things I wanted to start with was, yeah, let's talk about electoral reform and why that was such a big deal and why Trudeau reneging on that in 2015 was such a big deal. We have a lot of wasted votes in Canada and in Ontario politics. We've got first past the post, and if you grew up in a riding like I did here in Mississauga Lakeshore, where it's a competitive race between the Conservatives and the Liberals, you may have grown up learning to strategically vote because you're pretty much wasting your vote if you weren't trying to help decide that Liberal-Conservative two-way race. And so that leads to a lot of, you know, game theory things that happen, right? Like, suppose you do support your neighbor who's running, or you like the NDP, or who have you. You know, they aren't so competitive. You're kind of forced to choose the lesser of two evils in this two-way race that I think a lot of us, especially right now in 2023, are not fans of. Like, I would not be surprised if Pierre was our next prime minister, because we're upset with Justin, and there aren't too many other viable choices, are there? Like, okay, we could supposedly elect Jagmeet Singh, but he has, you know, he's propped up the Liberal government we have federally right now. That wouldn't be that much of a change, would it? Like that, I would take those Vegas odds on Pierre Poilievre. And it's kind of a foregone thing, isn't it? I mean, you know, maybe we forgive the Liberals, maybe we don't. That's kind of the dichotomy of the situation here without electoral reform. See, if we had electoral reform, if it wasn't first past the post, if people weren't so incentivized to, you know, engage in the two-way races that first past the post creates, we could have ranked ballots. You could, you know, rank your neighbor first on your ballot, and if he was the least viable candidate remaining after the ballots were tallied up, they would be eliminated and your vote would count towards your second choice. And maybe they're a viable candidate. You know, like you wouldn't be losing anything. You wouldn't be risking anything on a ranked ballot by supporting who you really want to support, by voting for who you really wanted to vote for. And I think a big reason why our politics here in Canada and in Ontario is so upsetting is why people, are angry about it. People are, it's past the point of not caring. It's people are actually angry, and we have, outright blatant corruption right now with the Ford government. We've got the Greenbelt scandal. The NDP this week are turning the screws to him. The RCMP are investigating Doug Ford over that stuff. I got to applaud the NDP for finding out what they find out this week. They found out that they found paperwork showing that some of these deals were already in the works before the public knew about them, which is kind of blatant corruption. So, good job on the NDP for uncovering that. But aside from electoral reform, ranked ballots, proportional representation, I want to address, reforms with government more broadly. I think part of the reason I called this part of the Electoral Reform Party was to lean into the reform part of that name. There's a lot of things we could be doing to make our government work better for us, and I think if you're an existing elected politician, you don't want to hear this stuff, but I think we should be making your job more difficult. I think there should be things that disqualify you from continuing to hold your position, that trigger a by-election, that give the people, you can still run in that by-election, heck, maybe you'll hold on to it, but, doing things like holding a town hall like this, like I am actually in a room by myself right now here at the Legion. The Zoom turnout is fantastic, though. I'm actually, pretty pleased about that. I knew people would prefer Zoom over actually coming here in person, and I know a lot of people that wanted to show up tonight that just weren't able. And we'll do this again, probably a month from now, with giving everybody much better notice, because putting this all together is tricky, and I think one of the things I wanted to highlight tonight, if it wasn't obvious already, is my social media game needs work. I need some help with this. I need some help organizing this stuff. It's not so easy, at least for me. I'm not so bad at the video stuff, though. Like, this is streaming on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter, as far as I can tell. So, I'm pretty proud we got that pulled off tonight. But making politicians' jobs more difficult, it's because of accountability. It's not because I want to make their job difficult. I understand that they can do a better job, potentially, without, a bunch of red tape. But this is Canada. This is the land of the red tape. Surely we can come up with a bunch of rules to make politicians' lives, more accountable. So, one of the first things I was starting with, easy discussion, is banning politicians from trading stock. I think if you are making these kinds of policy decisions, your stock portfolio should be in a blind trust, which is something, politicians in other countries might have. It used to happen. And, these things change, right? Politicians enact this legislation, and then they get rid of it. And that's, never a good sign. Banning politicians from trading stock, having them forced to put their stock into a blind trust, that would ensure that, they can't be profiting off the legislative decisions that they're considering while they're in office. Something more complicated is this idea I've been playing with of restricting the length of a government's mandate based on the portion of declined ballots. When I first thought of it, I thought maybe, just do it based on the voter turnout. But, it's kind of ambiguous. I was debating this with somebody. Welcome. It's a little ambiguous what low voter turnout necessarily means. It is a little ambiguous what low voter turnout necessarily means. I think it means disapproval of the choices offered. I think people are excited to vote for people when they like to, the candidates they're running. People get really passionate about politicians for some reason, but that you can't necessarily know that. And so by tying this to the number of declined ballots, what are we accomplishing? Well, let's back up a bit. What is declining your ballot? So when you go to vote on election day, and this is actually only in provincial elections. You can't do this federal. Welcome. when you decline your ballot provincially, what you're doing is you're not voting, but your name gets crossed off the voting list, right? You're not going to be able to cast a second ballot, and you're voicing that disapproval of the choices offered. It's not that you didn't want to show up or something like that. It's very clear that you didn't like the choices that were being offered here, and if that's the case, if that's what our province allows us to do by declining our ballot, I think it'd be a good idea if there was some teeth to that. There were some consequences to not voting, for declining your ballot, for saying I don't like any of these choices. So what I was thinking was, okay, suppose 25% of people that cast a ballot in the provincial election declined their ballot. Well, okay, a provincial government here in Ontario normally has a 4-year mandate. So maybe they would get 25% of that chopped off. Now they can only have a 3-year mandate, right? That expresses the civil unrest of the people, saying, we don't like you, we don't approve of you, Mr. Government, and we would rather have another election to decide what's going on here sooner rather than later. All right, more stuff about accountability of government is, the other things that I founded this party on. So when I founded this party, it was on electoral reform, ranked ballots, proportional representation, single transferable vote is the specific type of voting system I'm a proponent of, and the electoral reform party is a proponent of. But also, we wanted to put in place legislation that mandates MPPs have to hold a town hall in their riding every month. And I think that should be really strict. I think you should have to do what I'm doing here tonight every month, or maybe if you're sick, you have to reschedule, but it should trigger a by-election. We need this accountability. There's something about having people here in person that holds your feet to the fire. There's a distance. Welcome. There's a certain lack of accountability that can happen behind a screen. You see it with. You're welcome to come up here, Eric. I know you're just coming in from work. When people are trying to moderate things, right? They're less kind online. And just want to pan the camera here. We got my buddy Eric here, part of the party executive here. He's going to be joining me at there's this event happening in November. All these parties are being invited, just 2 representatives from each party. So our party's going to have Eric and I. And I have no idea what to expect. There are about 35 parties here in Ontario. And the reason there are so many is because it's actually not that difficult to start a party here in Ontario. Why don't we go on that tangent? All right, so how I started this party here in Ontario is I ran in the general election last May, wasn't it? No, the election was actually June 2nd. The campaign was all through May. Formed it in May to run on the June 2nd election, and in order to create a party here in Ontario, you can found it with, I think it's 1,000 founding members, or run 2 candidates that start off as independent candidates. And me and Cameron Rajewski, a friend of mine, declared ourselves the Electoral Reform Party. And there's a bunch of funny things that happen. They're like, you're supposed to have the party bank account before the party exists, and no bank wants to give you a bank account before your party exists. So you've got like Schrodinger's bank account. It's somebody has to give. Elections Ontario relented, it's not as hard as it sounds, right? Like running 2 candidates. What does that involve? Well, I thought I'd bring up the paperwork here tonight. I'm gonna pull it up. It's actually some of it's on the website, but what I put on the website actually is all the same paperwork for starting a party in Manitoba. There's a bunch of people, I think, in this call from Manitoba, which is part of the reason got me thinking about it. To start a party in Manitoba, we need to run 5 candidates. It's 2.5 times as difficult as starting a party here in Ontario, or you start a party with 20.
What are you trying to say about how easy it is to?
Well, okay, maybe I'm selling myself a little short here. Like, okay, to do that, you have to get people to endorse your campaign to run. But what are you asking, Eric?
What exactly is your problem or discovery with the fact that there is an ease of access to creating a party?
Right, yeah. So like I was saying, we got like 35 parties here in Ontario. It really diffuses the engagement in the small parties like this one. Like this is I mean, this party is pretty, this is really small, but there's a lot of small parties like us, and it really diffuses the engagement. If we start a party in Manitoba, where it's, way harder, there's only 7 parties in Manitoba, right? Like, they've got what? The NDP, the Conservatives, the Liberals, I think the Communists have a party there. I bet you the Greens do. There's probably an alt-right party, and I don't know who the other guys are, but just a handful of parties there. If we were to be the 8th party there, I think we'd get a lot more attention than, just being the 35th among many here in Ontario, right? Like, I expected more media attention when I started this party, and I was disappointed. People don't care. And when you're one of the bigger parties, you're kind of entitled to some media attention, actually. Like, I ran in a Hamilton by-election, and I just wasn't invited to participate in that debate because I wasn't from one of the major parties. So there's like a undercurrent of unaccountability happening there, right? I think if we form parties in other provinces, especially some of the provinces where it's more difficult, will get more credit and get more attention, get more of the pie, right? Like 1/8 of the pie, even if we're discriminated against, that still seems better than the current situation.
Yes. Well, speaking of this, this past election for Mississauga.
Okay, yeah, the Mississauga Lakeshore by-election, the one that I ran in, the federal one.
I believe
last
so.
year? Yeah. Okay.
How
yep.
How many candidates were?
Right. Yeah. So there were 40 candidates on that ballot. I was one among 40, and the winner of that by-election was Charles Souza, who was the former.
Of course. But has there been any sort of development towards ease of access, towards actually?
Right. Well, yeah, running
towards that.
Well, okay. So it used to cost you money to run here in Canada or in Ontario. I think maybe even municipally. But somebody who I think might be in the Zoom call, I didn't double check to see if he was here. I know his brother's here. Hey, Thomas. Made a challenge to the Supreme Court of Canada saying it was unconstitutional that it costs people this money to run. You have a right to run. And, especially in a cost of living crisis like we have right now, this was previous to that, before it got so bad. So he addressed it. So it doesn't cost you anything to run. To run, all you have to do is fill out basically some name and address stuff, and fill out a bunch of zeros as for how many finances you have of various kinds related to your campaign, and submit it off to Elections Ontario. And to run in Ontario, you need
actually, Peter,
25 citizens to nominate you from your riding.
So insofar as
you knock on their door, you tell them what you're running for. When you're part of a little party like this,
insofar as
they like what they
election reform,
mm-hmm.
would there be election reform on such an issue as this for you and your party?
Could you say that a different way? I don't know. What do you mean?
Would this be something that would be reformed?
What would be?
The process of running for the mayoral campaign.
The barriers to
access.
Making it easier to run, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I want to do with this party is, like, some of the links I'm putting up. There's already a Manitoba link up right now. Here, I'm gonna switch views here for the people on this stream. I'm gonna do a screen share. Where is it? Yeah. Okay. So on the website, if you go to electoralreformparty.ca / Manitoba. There are, I linked a bunch of documents related to doing all this stuff, so Manitoba. All right, so Manitoba Electoral Reform Party. Geez, that sounds good. So I took a look at the laws. Every province, they publish their laws, right, to maintain order, right? You need 5 candidates, or to be so that involves being nominated by 50 people in each of these candidates' respective ridings, and or 2,500 people, which is they could all be from one place, but that's obviously a lot more difficult. All right, here's the form for doing it though. Like it's just a PDF, and I swear this is easier than applying to most jobs. Like application for registration of a political party. The Ontario form is very, 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 very similar. There's a bunch of instructions on the, earlier pages. This is just like a name, address type of form. There's a couple of questions here that are really, they're minor. Like, they're dead straightforward. It's who's the personnel involved in your party? Where do they live? What's their address? And, you know, the funny thing, too, I've learned is the same individual can be the leader, the president, the CFO, all the compulsory positions. You don't need an auditor unless you've got, you know, actual, like, serious funding going on. I think you need, like, $2,500 at least coming in before you need an auditor. Maybe, was it 25,000? It's a lot. Way more than I have coming in. And look, this form is nearly done. Like, a couple of signatures. These are you're dating the form. It's done. It's 5 pages for Manitoba to form a party. The legwork is in getting these, you know, getting these founding members.
What does that say, Peter?
Well, I think it says that people are really disengaged politically. Like, I didn't have to work that hard to get this far. And, you know, all it takes is people stepping forward. Like, I'm nobody special here. We can do this, but nobody can do it alone, right? Like, if we just do this together, we can do it. And I think, you know, part of what I was also trying to talk about here with, you know, these forms really just being about addresses and personnel and that sort of thing, it's like our former CFO, Mike, he was living in BC, I think almost the entire time he was the, you know, Electoral Reform Party here in Ontario's CFO. Like, we can help each other in all these different provinces, you know, be the personnel to make this work. Like, it's not going to take as big a group as it seems to form 10 parties in, like, a federal party too. Like, I guess we form territorial parties too. I haven't looked into the territories yet, but I feel like it's more of the same. It's not that hard. Here is the other form, right? Okay, so this is just the list of the people, the citizens who would be nominating you to run. This is part of creating your party in Manitoba or, you know, what have you province. And it's just, you know, name, address, postal code. The important thing to remember about this stuff when you're canvassing door to door, get them to print. And it's so frustrating when, like, they forget to put, like, their unit number or something like that, because, you know, you probably want to go to addresses that aren't so far apart. But, like, yeah, it's dead easy. What's the form to be a candidate in an election? It's just name, address. Did a party endorse you? It's actually really easy, and you don't even need to live in the riding that you're running in. And that's an old thing, because these parties want to be able to parachute candidate.
Would you change that?
I think it's not such a great thing. I would be open to changing it. I'm not like I don't feel that strongly about it. No, I just don't feel that strongly about it. Like I think one of the things I'm trying to do with this party, and it's an uphill battle for me, is trying to run a candidate in every riding here in Ontario. How many do we have? Like 300.
Well, what would you have that candidate run on?
Well, okay, so the idea with this party is to, you know, I want it to be kind of like a collective, you know, like we agree about a handful of things, maybe 2 handfuls, about a dozen things, and then we have, you know, a lot of free votes where we say, all right, you, Mr. Representative from the Northern Ontario riding, I need you to represent your constituents on the issue. And I understand that that's different from how, you know, constituents over here in urban Ontario feel about a lot of things. But, you know, we agree about electoral reform and accountability of government and about cost of living stuff. Like, we have this issue here in Canada. It's said that party discipline is very strict. And what they mean by that is if you're an MP or an MPP for any of these parties, 99.9% of the time you always vote the way the party whip is telling you to. I ran against Charles Sousa, and I literally combed through 3 terms of his provincial voting record. I don't think he did it once. Like, I feel like I might have made a mistake. I don't think he did it once. And granted, he was the, you know, finance minister of the province, least likely to be a dissenting voice, but he was not unique. Coming through, you know, I didn't just look at his to get his voting record, I get everybody else's. And, you know, I was just combing through all these votes, sticking them into my spreadsheet and, you know, parsing it. It's upsetting, right? Like, why do we even run candidates from these local ridings? Like, what is even the point when, you know, we could have a computer algorithm that basically says, all right, your riding went Liberal, all right, so for, like, you know, the next 4 years, your your riding, this algorithm will vote Liberal on every issue that happens over the next 4 years. Like, we could save taxpayer dollars by not even having that man in that chair that says yay with the other Liberals, the other.
Oh, I agree with that.
Like,
That's
it's entirely ridiculous.
Yeah, I believe it's over the past 25 years. Canadian politics has become so divided along party lines that
it's very partisan. It's extremely partisan here. Let's.
And how would you change that?
Well, okay. I think when you have electoral reform, you're less likely to get these majority governments.
What reform would you do?
Okay, when you have ranked ballots and proportional representation, so like single transferable vote, you're probably never going to have a Liberal majority here in Ontario again, because all those people who aren't strategically voting suddenly tip things in a way that the Liberals probably can't pull it over the line. Same thing with the Conservatives. They probably. And it means you have these coalitions of smaller parties trying to work together. Like right now we have a coalition government federally, and you can see, okay, what are the NDP saying this week? They're saying that they will force an election. They'll walk away from this coalition with the Liberals if the Liberals don't get serious about pharmacare stuff, which, I think is great. I know that there actually already is a good drug policy for people who are on welfare. I would maybe be going after mental health stuff because that's way harder to fund and further behind right now. But they accomplished some stuff with the dental stuff. It wasn't what they set out to do. It was I know I don't qualify for it. It's for kids, right, and like families, and that'll help out people. It's just in its infancy, I think, that policy. But you have these coalitions that try to sway the other parties. Exactly what I was trying to illustrate there with the Liberals. Like they're doing stuff that they don't want to do because the NDP hold the balance of power here in Canada federally, and they're able to say, okay, well, we'll force another election if you don't do what we want you to do. And a little bit of that is a game of chicken. Are they actually serious? But yeah, I think the NDP are serious about the dental stuff, or I mean about the drug plan stuff. It's just insurance companies who are losing out on that. We should be negotiating as a single entity, I think. I just want to, what else are we talking about here? Ask me something, Eric. I just want to look at my notes and make sure I'm not forgetting some things, because I haven't talked about any of the cost of living stuff that this party is about, because that's kind of new.
It is unaffordable to live.
Yeah, all right. So let's get into some of that stuff. All right, so inspired by Saskatchewan, I learned about this thing in Saskatchewan. They've got this thing. It's a Crown Corporation telecommunications company. So it's like Bell or Rogers or TELUS. They're a cell phone provider. They're called SaskTel. And the amazing thing about SaskTel is they undercut Bell, Rogers, and TELUS by like nearly 50%. I know I'm exaggerating when I say 50%, so I'm going to say 40%. And then TELUS, Rogers, and Bell had to slash their prices in order to compete.
Like, how did that happen? Was it how did SaskTel happen? Was it through government funding?
I think it was
create an entity that acted as a corporation.
Yes, it's not a public-private corporation, which is something we like to do in Ontario, if I recall. It's just an only Crown corporation, and so it doesn't have any of these corporate incentives to try to
But it does have
earn more money back for the public. I think part of what it's trying to do is save the public money. Like, when we try to invest in, say, public transportation, some politicians look at it as, well, what are we getting back out of it? How much, for every dollar we spend on that, how much do we get into the economy? Sometimes it's not always about getting something back financially. It's about, all the other things that you get out of it. But you actually get a ton.
Lived experience of life, right? Like, why make something beautiful if it can just work, right? No, it's true. There's expressions to that.
So with this SaskTel thing, like, I feel like we could be copying that here in Ontario, right? Like, okay, by the way, if you're ever traveling through Saskatchewan, sign up for your cell phone while you're traveling through there, because these Bell, TELUS, Rogers plans that you get in Saskatchewan that are half the price you pay in the rest of the country, 40% less, are, national plans. They still work in Ontario. Those people who carry their numbers from other provinces, this is a good reason to be doing that.
That's a great tip, Peter.
Yeah, just to save you money, Take a vacation in Saskatchewan, beautiful Saskatchewan, the breadbasket of Canada. We could be doing that in Ontario. We could be doing it again with grocery stores too, though, right? Like Loblaws, Sobeys, Metro, they've got, a monopoly between the three of them. We don't have any teeth in our antitrust legislation, evidently. Like, that's one of the things you'll notice when you travel the country is the same multinational companies in every corner. It's, a little sad.
What do you think about just actually inviting SaskTel as a corporation?
You know what? I'd be happy to have them here. It's better than the status quo, but why don't we do it just ourselves in Ontario? Like, there's probably
there could be, but
aspects of control for Ontarians that we'd like. But let's actually talk about control and the telecommunication company stuff, like accountability of government. One of the things I'm a proponent of is let's use sortition, which is the same thing we use for jury duty. It's random selection for some of these regulatory positions. Like if you are the head of the CRTC, how about instead of you being a former TELUS or Rogers or Bell executive, you are randomly selected from the population and you are, given the opportunity to have this cushy gig, and you could turn it down if you want to, and we can, draw somebody else's name. It's like, you declined your lottery winnings. But I think there would be more accountability. I feel like that's harder to corrupt because we've got so much regulatory capture in this country. I feel like we need stuff like that. But, just about the accountability of the cost of living stuff to back up again. SaskTel, doing it with groceries, and let's just talk about housing, right? Okay, so why are the other parties, every party will tell you what you want to hear. They'll say, they want to make the cost of housing go down, but people, people try to, have their cake and eat it too. They try to say, we're going to address the housing crisis, but we're also, going to keep house prices up, and those are mutually exclusive, right? Like we can't protect homeowner investments and make the cost of housing go down. They're mutually exclusive, right? And so for a while here in Canada, we've had these parties that they believe they couldn't find a winning coalition without catering to homeowners in the real estate sector. It's a huge part of our economy. It's traditionally always been a part of a winning coalition in like any government you had provincially, federally. Like you're really going against the trends of Canadian history, not siding with homeowners if you try to address this issue, right? So like it's the kind of issue where we've been hearing, what we want to hear for decades now. Like it keeps getting worse, right? So like you need a politician that's actually going to like explicitly say, home prices are going to go down and to be a little bit tough about that. Like I think house prices have gone up and that's been unfair. And if it's a little unfair, how we address this issue, that might be making up a little bit for, just how difficult and complicated this issue is. It's already been unfair. The scales have already been tipped one way. It may need to be, there may be overcorrections, to get things going the way they need to be. If we want to address housing, what do we need to do? Okay, so, I believe we've already banned international owners or, in some form with many loopholes that was ineffective. I think we need to tighten that. It did a little bit, but not enough. The students, but like housing as an investment is where it's a real issue. I've been playing around with the idea. I went door to door in Hamilton, not knowing what people would say, Hamilton Centre in their by-election, saying, what if we put a limit on how many houses people were allowed to own? I remember telling my mom about this. She called me a Bolshevik. She thought this sounded like the Russian Revolution. This is, something that I expected to rub people the wrong way. I was, scared to tell people, what if we put a limit on the number of houses somebody's allowed to own? I threw out the number 3. I'm negotiable, right? But
I'm a big 4 guy.
Yeah, okay. 3 sounded okay. Okay, you got a place to live. You got maybe a cottage. Maybe you got something to rent out, or I don't know what the hell. But like, you're already doing pretty well in that case. You don't need. You make so much money off rent. Damn.
Well, life is not about money.
Yeah, there are more important things, aren't there?
Yeah, like living, like time spent. And realistically, if you're not able to spend any time living, you're just earning away. It's a touch like slavery. If you aren't able to spend any time in your life to dedicate it to what you want to be doing to increase your ability in life, you can't move forward, you're stuck, you're dealt with.
Yeah.
There's only so much time in a day.
I used to, have a lot of friends that worked for the weekend. They used to really enjoy themselves on the weekend, and I haven't really been hearing much of that anymore, right? Like the getting by has been so tough for most people in Ontario, most people in Canada, that we aren't spending any money on luxuries so much anymore. I mean, you have to spend your money to enjoy yourself doing something. Like we're not gonna. And a lot of people have some streaming service, right? Like it's not worth saving the $10 or $15. You got to have something to do at home, right?
I think the real issue at hand is that people have no time and no money and are going into debt, living the life that they're living, which is just paying rent and eating food.
Yeah, what was it? It's supposed to be like 30% of your income, and I was learning recently that during the Great Depression, some like hard numbers, it was looking like people were actually only paying about 10% of their salary on housing. So, and what is it now? Like it's not uncommon for people to be putting north of 60% of their salary towards their housing. Like,
well, Peter,
I know me personally, I was putting like 3/4 in my.
Peter, 40 hours of $15 an hour, maybe $16.50. Did it just increase?
We have stagnant wages. We have for a long time.
That's $600 a week, bud, and that means it's $2,400 a month. You can't afford a one-bedroom at that.
There's all these things that people our society can't afford to do because our people can't afford to live, right? Like there's all these secondary consequences to this housing thing. Like it's the camel's back must break on this issue. It's the headline this morning was that our military is having trouble excuse me, getting people to our military can't find places to live, and it's hurting with recruitment in Canadian Armed Forces. Headline today, I forget which paper, saw it on Reddit. There are going to be a lot of secondary consequences here, and okay, so what else can we do besides tackling how many people are buying up the housing? Like restricting who gets to buy it up, maybe banning corporations from doing it. That is a very popular idea.
Well,
that seems kind of radical.
I think a great idea is publicly owned, Crown-owned.
Social housing, yes, sir. We used to build a ton of it. Non-market housing. I'm a big believer as well. Yes.
If you set out the cost of this building over the course of 40 years of mortgage payments, you'll be able to pay off the debt incurred by actually producing the building via rent. And then you would be ending up at net neutral for your expenditures, hopefully. You just budget everything out. After 40 years, the mortgage is paid off. And the city now owns a building, the province now owns a building, the feds now own a building, and they sell this building. So what ends up happening is that you move this public building to private hands.
I love it. Yes.
With positive returns on a government-funded plan.
If anybody should be making money off this this
ensuring
housing
people can
situation,
live lives.
I think the public would be the best people to make a buck off it. Let the government make a bit of a buck off of it. Yeah. Let them invest in housing. Let it appreciate. That's how you're able to offer non-market housing long term. Like there's this great video. Oh man, I can't remember. It take place in Vancouver. They're talking all about non-market housing, the non-market housing solution to the housing problem. If you want to Google it, and
I don't think non-market is the solution.
Well, that means below
competing at bare necessity.
They bought up some of the housing in Olympic Village, which is where the athletes lived in the 2010 Vancouver Olympics. That became apartments, and some of it became public housing. the rent there, it used to be something like, I don't know, $1,000 a month, after the Olympics ended, which was steep at the time, shortly after 2010, supposedly, for Vancouver. Now that's a hell of a deal. Like, they haven't had to raise the prices because their expenses, were pretty much, they have an old mortgage that's basically paid off now. They're in a totally different situation than people who are investing in housing today with these interest rates that do worry a lot of people, actually.
Do you
I think
have
they'll come down.
any problems with real estate being an investment tool?
Yeah, I do, because I think, it's too good of an investment tool. Like, I think everybody should be able to get in on that. I just think that
That's
corporations and
It's not
some
happening,
individuals
is it?
are getting a little too in on that. Like, it's the kind of thing, if we were, making a massively multiplayer online game, like an RPG type of thing, we would let each account only have one of those things. Like, it's too strong. We need to balance. We need a new patch for the game, right? Like, you can only buy one of that item. You can only get one house, or something like this, right? Like, everybody should be able to get in on the housing thing, right? Like 1, 4, 5. I'm proposing you put a limit on it, but I'm open to other aggressive ways of tackling the housing issue, because I think it's going to take something aggressive that's pretty divisive and unpopular. I wanted, people on the Zoom call to get a chance to speak if they want. I just want to check in on the Zoom call stuff. What were you going to say there, Eric?
No, that's a great interlude. A question if they have it.
Yeah, I had this great widget that was going to check in on all the streams for me. It did not load when I got to the Legion, unfortunately. Let's get this screen share. All right, yeah, this is the software.
I'm just gonna step out for a second.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, people in the Zoom call, you guys, I can pipe your sound into the whole meeting and everything here. I can kind of full screen this. Who, if anyone, wanted to speak? There's this like feature in Zoom where you can kind of like raise your hand or what have you, or unmute yourself. I'll see how it goes. Let's see. Yeah, desktop audio is unmuted, so if somebody were to start speaking, we would hear you. Anyways, yeah, check in with me, put a message up. I see there's one chat here. Cool, yep. All right, I'll check back in with the Zoom stuff. It is 7:30. Hey, we're doing all right for time. I knew I'd be able to talk through like half the meeting, and I've succeeded. I knew today was, not going to be the smoothest of town halls or riding association meetings or what have you, but yeah, we will probably not be forming riding associations today. I was hoping for more in-person stuff, but like actually anybody, in the Zoom call can reach out. You can represent a riding, you can have one of the roles here, you can have a bunch of the roles here. We will talk. I need personnel. If this party is really going to be anything real, it can't be a one-man show. Nobody can do it alone. I'm kind of wondering, like, what people who showed up to this event, if I can, maybe prompt some of the people in the call to comment, what did you guys want to see from me? Like, you don't have to talk, you can use the chat. I'm looking at it right now, obviously, right? But like, when I go door to door, I was always asking people, what they wanted to, see from their politicians, and a lot of people are just saying, lower the cost of living. That's really all they care about right now. These identity politics things are not as popular as they were just a year or two ago. I'm not a fan of them. That's actually one of the things that turned me off the NDP. I think they sort of abandoned their working class roots to play the identity politics game. And the reason there is so much identity politics happening today is that it is kind of a trump card. It's really easy to play the us versus them game, to to be bigoted in one form or another, to, divide people by, young or old or what have you, right? Like, the reason LGBT is a divisive issue right now in politics is because it's divisive, right? It gets one base out to the polls. If you can, a lot of our politics is fear motivated, right? And you can drive people to the polls by playing on their fears. And if you really don't believe me about how divisive identity politics are, you might have heard the news about the Middle East this week. The age-old conflict has been reignited, and it's it's a difficult thing to talk about. I'm putting myself on the spot here. I obviously condemn a lot of the violence on both sides that's been going on here. It's tempting here in the West. Israel is our ally to not be as forceful condemning some of their actions against Palestinians, but they need to be held accountable. There are some war crimes going on there, and it's not to say I condone what the Palestinians or Hamas, which shouldn't be conflated with one another, what's going on there. But look, you see how difficult and careful I have to be saying my words here? I don't enjoy talking about it. I don't feel particularly strongly about it. I think all that's happened is peace has been set back by several decades, and things have gotten measurably worse. It's unspeakable, those tragedies, but obviously, even just, towing that line that I just said, trying to be pretty respectful and inoffensive, probably, cost me a ton of votes and probably won me a ton of others, or, what have you. I'm sure some people want to hear me be pro-Palestinian, others want to hear me be pro-Jewish, and identity politics, I feel like it matters so little, right, with what's going on with all these other issues that are happening right now. It's such a distraction, in my view, and maybe I'm awfully pale and white to be saying that sort of thing. Maybe it's not so much of an issue for me here in Canada, but I think it distracts from the things that affect all of us, no matter who we are, race, religion, creed, the working class issues, the issues about accountability of government, the things that really don't divide all of us, that we can be unified on, that can't seem to be addressed. The identity politics that I'm not fond of, I feel, is part of the reason why. And why we don't come together on these things. And I'd like us to. I feel like people who support, many different types of politics could become members and involved with this party. I said in my promotional video to Liberal Party loyalists, we can prevent another Conservative majority for another 100 years. That is true. Just as much as it's true that Conservative supporters can join this party and probably prevent another Liberal majority for the rest of our lives. Both those parties almost definitely rely on first past the post in order to get their majorities. A lot of the fear that comes from, the other one winning is what draws people out to the polls. It's not so much that Liberal voters like their Liberal candidate so much as they fear their Conservative candidate, and vice versa. And, the NDP, I'm just sort of a less divisive variant of the NDP, I think. I'm just about the accountability of government, the the accountability of government, the ranked ballots and proportional representation from electoral reform, and cost of living stuff. But I see the NDP as allies, just not viable in a lot of places. People from the PPC, I know that's federal politics and I'm provincial here, but if there's anything that they seem to stand for, in my opinion, it is sane immigration. I feel like there's a real bigoted undercurrent in that party, but I think attitudes have changed about immigration in Canada. It used to be, if you were in favor of limiting immigration in Canada, you were probably a racist. But the way things are with this increased immigration now, we have so many people coming into the country. It's exacerbating so many of our cost of living problems, like housing. Everybody's up in arms about it. It used to be what, about 1%, like a lot of other countries. We dipped down to 0.5% before the pandemic. Now we're at what, 2.5% of our population. We have 40 million Canadians now. We're increasing it by 2.5% per year at this current rate. We're not equipped for that is the problem. Like, we don't have enough doctors and houses and, gosh, so many things. Like, it's the reason we have so many of these, why we have immigration at the levels it's at is we're trying to undercut the value of Canadian labor. Like, okay, if Canadians won't do it for, this shitty wage, then we'll find somebody from some corner of the world that will. And that is not good for Canadians. Like, if Canadians were getting a fair wage, I think we would be fruit pickers. I would absolutely go pick some strawberries for $20 an hour. That sounds fun, but we don't need to outsource that. We don't need to pay people from the temporary foreign workers program to run in a Tim Hortons. That's actually kind of a cushy gig if you actually pay it fairly enough, right? Like, if people aren't being exploited, then a lot of these jobs start to look a lot more rosy, don't they? It shouldn't be so tough. To the Greens, I'm an environmentalist myself. I feel like your party is so one-dimensional that even though I know you guys agree with electoral reform and a bunch of these other issues, the messaging has been so off that it doesn't reflect it. You guys have had so much support, so many opportunities, and I really respect the leader of the Greens here in Ontario. Over in Guelph, I am spacing on his name. Do you remember the name? Andrew Schreiner, I want to say. Sheen? I'm butchering that, I'm sorry. Can anybody in the chat help me with that? Maybe? I also want to give a shout out to young people, because I think young people need to realize that they are the most valuable thing of all in economies in the 21st century. Like, there's no asset more valuable, and the way it's not just, a lot of these issues aren't specific to Canada and Ontario. They're common in a lot of democracies around the world, and young people are getting screwed. We're getting a raw deal here. And given how dependent our societies, especially economically, for taking care of the baby boomers in the coming decades and whatnot, are on our young people earning a good income, to tax, you'd think we'd be competing with our legislation to try to incentivize young people to stick around. Like, I'm looking at the United States, I'm looking in Europe, I'm looking in, like, what does it mean to live in South America and, not make much money, but not have to spend so much money too? Like, there's a lot of luxuries that we have here in Canada that I might be willing to forego for just a more relaxed, stable living situation. I'm just going to check in with the Zoom stuff. Pardon me?
Mike Schreiner.
Mike Schreiner? I was very close then. Okay, good stuff, Mike. Yeah, I just think that party needs to be built better. I would have loved to get involved. All right, we've got some more comments here in the chat. This is great. Okay, what is your view on immigration? I ended up touching on that. It's too many of them. I don't know what you mean by them, Bob Dole, unless we're talking about immigration, in which case I understand what you're talking about. Insurance rates. Well, insurance, is kind of a middleman on a lot of things that should probably be public services. Exception to that potentially being car insurance. Not trying to say they're not a middleman, but I know there's a lot of people that complain about the single-payer system we have in BC with car insurance. You've got no competition there in BC, and so rates are kind of expensive. But usually, pretty much every insurance industry, the alternative to that is having a single payer and being able to, unite all of that buying power to get a good price on what have you, drugs, healthcare, dental, psychotherapy, what have you. Speaking of psychotherapy, that is probably the next big target that the progressive movement should be aiming at. What about the opioid epidemic? Thank you, Bob, for mentioning. Yeah, it is terrible, and fentanyl is coming in mostly off the West Coast, imported into Vancouver. It is thought that a lot of it is coming out from China, and that there's not a whole lot we can do to prevent it from coming into our borders, because there's so many packages coming. Like, you won't catch it, and it's so small, right? Like, it's tiny, like a grain of salt is enough to overdose on. This stuff is so easy to cut and make a lot of opioids out of. And the opioid epidemic hasn't been talked about very much by any of the political parties, and I almost made the faux pas of not getting into it myself. But I feel that we should be aspiring to copy Portugal's drug policy. We've got BC, sort of leading the charge right now. They've decriminalized a bunch of drugs in Vancouver proper, and I think across the province. You're allowed to carry around a couple of grams of a bunch of pretty hard drugs, cocaine, I think heroin. I'm trying to remember all the other fun things that. But the thinking behind this is that, well, okay, it's a half measure the way it's being implemented in BC. The thinking is the way it's being implemented in Portugal isn't just that these things were legalized, a personal amount that you can carry around. The thinking behind that, by the way, is to treat it as a health problem and not a criminal problem, because that's what it really is. It should be part of our healthcare budget, addressing this stuff and getting people counseling and that sort of thing. What they do in Portugal is they offer, you can do a prison stint for possession, or you can be offered a stint in rehab. There's rehabilitation, which isn't necessarily stay in. That's the way we should be tackling this stuff, and it's a half measure the way we've done it in BC without going the whole way with the rehabilitation. Without that component, I think all we've done is just make the rave scene great in BC. I think we need to have the rehabilitation part of it be included, or we're not really accomplishing a whole lot other than at least starting to address it as a health problem and not addressing it as a criminal problem. Like, you're not addressing it as a criminal problem. All right, let's also address it as a health problem, right? Like, you have to move both feet on that issue. So yeah, when it comes to the opioid crisis, I'm a proponent of legalizing this crap, but it's a harm prevention thing too. But spending on psychotherapy and drug counseling and helping people, quit the drugs they're using. Like, I was having a cigarette while I was getting ready for this meeting, and people who want to quit their addictions want to quit them. Like, they need help, a lot of them. And hey, I am actually doing pretty well on my smoking recently, by the way. But yeah, people want to quit, and the easier we make it for people with smoking cessation aids or what have you, for whatever, the better it'll be. And the less bigoted and prejudiced we are about addicts, I think the better it'll be too. How can we stop illegal trade routes? I don't know that we can. I think it's a good aim. For the time being, if we're going to continue to import so many things from China, I don't think it is possible. It is feasible to. It's just a small amount of the weight of everything else coming through. Like, it's a needle in a haystack, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, it's just falling through. Are there any other questions? You guys have been great with the prompts here in the chat. I'm really appreciating it. I'm looking at the chat right now in the Zoom call. I'm just going to maybe check social media real quick, see if these Facebook or what have you party accounts got much in the way of comments during this live stream. Liberal plus NDP. Do you think the coalition will last? I think the Liberals are not in any position to have an election, so the NDP have a really strong position with this balance of power that they have. They're trying to hold the Liberals to their feet to the fire on this drug policy stuff is probably going to work. We're probably going to get a better drug policy here in Canada because of this situation. We're probably, I'd say at least a year out from any federal election. It's a little premature to be talking about Pierre Poilievre to the extent that the media and even myself are, but he probably is going to be the next Prime Minister given people's attitudes about Justin. And just because that's how it goes here, right? Like we don't elect, we don't go from one guy we like to another guy we like to another guy we like. We go from one party or one, leader that we hated to some alternative that we, haven't come to hate yet to another, leader that we haven't come to hate yet. We never really get to pick somebody that we actually like. Yeah, it's very predictable. I'm planning to wager Vegas odds on more elections. Just trying to authenticate myself for this thing. Any more comments from Zoom? Because that's the easiest place for me to look still. Return to meeting. Will we finally vote to stick down Order 66B? I'm sure this is a prequel meme reference that I just can't place right now. Isn't Order 6? Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that is as a Clone Wars meme right there. That's when the robots all turn on the Jedi, right? Yeah, we could probably pull off something. I think a bunch of these liberals and conservatives and NDP and what have you should turn on their parties and join me. Yeah, a bunch of you are already members of all these parties, right? We've got spies on the inside. Are there? We're going to wrap this up really soon. I'm just going to keep checking social media stuff. Are there any other comments from anybody? Did anybody, want a chance to speak on the Zoom call that didn't get one? I didn't mean to not let people talk. All right, speak now or forever hold your peace, right? You can just unmute yourself, all right? I'm going to Alt-Tab. Looking at Twitter, looking at Facebook. We'll do another one of these, probably about a month from now. Maybe give myself a little more than a month to do it, but try not to make it run into the holiday season so much. Yeah, maybe this place will be all booked up for Christmas and stuff. Got a good deal here, by the way. If you're looking to host a public event, which this qualified as, this was $30 an hour. Like, that's very reasonable. An hour and a half is $51, including HST. The normal price was like $200, starting at $200. And if you're a community event like we are tonight, even though we're a political party, it's a community event as well. Other ideas for where to host a meeting like this? I don't know, maybe a church. I'm not terribly religious myself. I'm not religious myself, but I would go to a church as a place to host something like this. All kinds of places. I think it's, once you start getting creative, hosting a town hall or a riding association meeting of this kind isn't as hard as maybe it seems. And I think, even though the turnout isn't that many people here in person or that many people online, this is definitely a success. I mean, the pressure of doing this live definitely made things go smoother. And this was going to be a success no matter what, because part of what we were doing tonight was demonstrating, how easy it is to hold a town hall and what that's supposed to look like, and what is holding a riding association meeting like. It's kind of like this. Usually there's more people, especially in person. a lot of people kind of taking themselves too seriously. That's the one thing I always hated about it. But usually it's just a lot of people with a interest in politics. You know, usually they're kind of fans of the party that they're meeting for or what have you. But like, not necessarily. You know, there's always people on the fringe that are just kind of like, you know, judging the party they're there to see. Sort of, you know, critics of the thing they support, which is important, right? You don't want to be blindly loyal to any cause. And I would, you know, along that line of thinking, I would want people, if you were to be involved in this party and to run as a candidate or get elected, you know, to vote against me sometimes, right? Like, I can't be this, we're not going to have a strict party whip like that. You need to represent your ridings. That's the whole big part of what we're doing here. Very slowly checking this. There's nothing on Facebook. There's nothing on Twitter as far as questions. So I think we'll wrap it up unless there's some, you know, comments I can't see from here. Sorry. We'll catch you next time. Probably 5 or 6 weeks away. We'll do another one of these. It'll, I'm sure, be a bigger success because, you know, this is a little bit of a trial run here. But thank you everyone who did show up and for supporting me and for, you know, taking an interest in what I'm trying to do here, because nobody can do it alone, and I am looking for people to get involved. There are party executive positions available. Speak to me if you want to be involved. And we're going to be starting more of these parties. I'm going to be reaching out to, you know, a lot of people individually, more mass messages too, to start parties in other provinces and to build up the federal party, which, by the way, you can be a founding member of. electoralreformparty.ca/join will take you there, and there are links on the electoralreformparty.ca website, and there's more information on the Electoral Reform website. And one thing I forgot to talk about is this, you know, we'll get to it next time. Everybody, have a great night. Ciao.